Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a review of the final Les Indemodables that I have in my collection, in my possession, that I have not reviewed on the channel. There's still a bunch that I haven't talked about. I just don't have any of the juice. I haven't smelled Patchouli Noisette. I haven't smelled the Fougere. I haven't smelled the Queer, the Leather. I haven't smelled any of, well, not any of them, but I haven't smelled a lot of them. You can go watch my, there's a Les Indemodables playlist where you can go see all of my reviews if you would like. But today, sadly, we're reviewing the final Les Indemodables that is in my collection, and it is Rose de Jamal. And you notice I don't have full bottles of these because I came across a buddy that gave me these at an amazing value. And so I've been working off of decants, but many of these are full bottle worthy, including Rose de Jamal. There's an amazing sort of backstory, if you will. This to me is one of the best rose fragrances in my collection. And we'll talk a little bit about the backstory. And it's not always that I use props. Actually, I never use props, to be honest with you. And you never see pictures or words on my videos because, number one, I don't know how. And number two, I just with work and everything don't have the time to go in there and edit everything. If I'm going to do these videos, I'm going to talk, upload it, and then just upload it as it is, and that's that. But for Father's Day, or the day before Father's Day, really, me and my my beautiful daughter went shopping, and she saw these roses, and she picked them out. And as soon as she picked them out and I saw the color, I was like, I have to review Rose de Jamal, because just seeing the color in the store brought me to thinking about this perfume. Even though I wasn't wearing it, I was like, this is the perfect representation for everyone who has never smelled Rose de Jamal. So here it is. This is the smell of Rose de Jamal to me. This color rose, not a dark, dripping sort of, plasticky red rose, not a lipstick rose, not a jammy rose, not even a green rose in some aspect. But if you can just imagine distilling the petals of these beautiful roses from Costco, which is not bad, actually. They were only like $18 for this quality rose, and my daughter was just infatuated with them. She kept wanting to smell them, and they are beautiful, I will tell you that. But so here's the note listing. Let me do the note listing and tell you a little bit about the backstory, and then I'll give you my 2 cents on the fragrance. But came out in 2019. It is an Antoine Lie creation, and it's classified as a floral green fragrance by Parfumo. But to me, this almost smells like a rose-heavy tilt on a fougere. And we'll talk a little bit about why here as we go along in the review. But I just did a fresh spray, or else I would have sprayed it on camera. But, I mean, you can almost still see the sheen maybe 15, 20 minutes ago. So I'm still sort of in the beautiful, fresh opening. And it is gorgeous. The one beef I may say that a man would have in the Western Hemisphere anyways. I know a lot of guys in the Middle East and the Orient and stuff like that, they have no problem wearing rose. But at least in America, there's a lot of guys that balk at rose. They consider it to be a feminine type smell, a feminine floral. And rose is one of those ingredients that had to grow on me, because when I first started into this hobby, I felt exactly the same way, actually. I really felt like rose was not for me. I didn't like rose in perfume. It took me a long time to come around to it. Rose and vetiver were 2 notes that really took me a while to come around to. I didn't think I liked vetiver. I didn't think I liked rose. And now here I am, a rose and a vetiver lover. So your taste will change in this hobby as time goes on. But so this is a rose dominant fragrance, okay? There's a lot of other notes going on, but rose is in the name, and it stays true to its name. So the note listing is Moroccan Rose Absolute, Madagascan Pink Pepper CO2, Moroccan Mint, Atlas Cedar, Moroccan Geranium, and French Lavender. That's the official note listing, I believe. So there is some cedar wood. There's some other things than just rose. I wouldn't call this just a rose soliflor, but it's important to note that true rose oil nowadays used in perfumery is heavily restricted thanks to IFRA. Everyone talks about oak moss restriction, and the oak moss restriction is extremely, I would say, it really limits what can be done with oak moss, what perfumers can use. I think the max oak moss now is 0.1% or something very small. And I believe the rose restriction is still much higher than that, but it still is somewhat restrictive. You could never do what Arise Ladore did with my favorite rose fragrance, which I'm still hunting down a bottle called Malik Al Taif. I want a bottle of that. It's like the one bottle that's like my serious wish list. You can never do what Russian Adam did there and do a 40% rose oil. So this obviously isn't going to compete with that. It isn't going to compete with the pure beauty of just pure rose oil. If that's really what you're after, you have to buy some pure rose oil. I actually reviewed a pure rose oil, not even a perfume, just a rose oil from Ensar Oud called Japanese Rose, and that was amazing. That sort of experience, you're going to have to go away from the perfume and go towards the pure rose oil. But just when you compare something like this to other, let's say, masculine targeted rose, although this is unisex, I think this kind of leans in the masculine style of rose creation, if that makes sense. If you've ever smelled something like Acteur by Azzaro, by the house of Loris Azzaro, Acteur is a spicy masculine rose. I'll review this one of these days. This is one of my favorite roses no one talks about. And of course, the most popular one that everyone talks about is this one right here. Should have had it ready, sorry. It is Lyric Man by Amouage, and I love this stuff. And this is the one where when I smelled it, when it first came out, I remember thinking, this is not for me. How in the world could a man ever wear this? This is, much too feminine for a man. I actually had a mini and I gave it to my mother because I was like, there's no way in hell I could ever wear this kind of thing, right? And slowly but surely, rose has grown on me, right? And so those are two examples of quote-unquote masculine rose fragrances. But what makes Rose de Jamal so special is that this smells like you are smelling something that has a real amount of true rose oil. Now, it's actually Rose Absolute. It's not the Otto. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll discuss it later on in the review, but it really feels like you're smelling something that you're being blessed with a real proper amount of rose oil. It's one of the reasons why Portrait of a Lady is so sort of fawned after by and drooled all over by so many fragrance enthusiasts, because Ropion had to jump through some serious hoops to go through enough real rose oil. They had to use it in a certain way. There's a certain ingredient in the rose oil that can be removed, but apparently it makes the rose smell different. So they had to mix some of the real rose without the ingredient removed with some that was, and there's a whole documentation of it by Ropion on making Portrait of a Lady to try to meet IFRA regulations, okay? So, like I said, I've reviewed some amazing rose oil or rose fragrances on the channel, but this is one of my all-time favorites. And when you compare it to the niche fragrance realm, these are probably two of my favorite niche rose fragrances for men, if you will. The rose in Rose de Jamal basically starts out as very bright and very fresh. And it literally smells like, you're smelling fresh mint and fresh rose kind of put together, especially in the first hour or so. It's absolutely beautiful and lovely. Like I said, some guys may find this a little bit too feminine for their taste, but objectively, this is a lovely fragrance to me. And so the name Rose de Jamal, interestingly enough, the name Rose de Jamal is literally a shout out to a farmer who is named Jamal, who lives in Morocco. He's a Moroccan rose farmer. And Les Indemodables get their rose oil from this actual farmer. There's actually a real farmer named Jamal, and that's where this oil comes from. And that just proves sort of how local Les Indemodables goes to farm the best ingredients. And the fact that there's literally a rose farmer named Jamal, and they named the fragrance after him. The rose oil was so amazing. And so in each bottle, Jamal's roses are literally in each bottle of Rose de Jamal that you get. And I think that's kind of cool. So the big question about this one is, what is it outside of just a rose? Because obviously it's a rose, right? But I don't think it's a rose soliflor. I'm not ready to call it a rose soliflor. I think it is a rose heavy composition, but I think it feels like there's a lot of fougere-like touches in here, if you will. It feels like the rose is very amped up in the fougere. Just like I've often said that Roja does all these different takes on chypres and amps up a certain note here or there. If you go watch many of my old Roja reviews, you'll hear a lot about that. My Roja Dove or Roja Parfum fragrance reviews, if you will. He loves taking the chypre sort of style and then changing a thing or two here or there. This feels like almost taking that fougere style a bit, and Antoine Lie using his back history and knowledge of perfumery and amping the rose up in a way that just makes it lovely. Lovely is the word here. And because you will get the lavender, okay? You will get the geranium, and this is not the scratchy, harsher lavandin smell. This is the proper French lavender, very floral and smooth. And the geranium, I think, helps support the rose in a way. And geranium can almost be used as a rose replacement by some very, let's say, nifty perfumers who know how to play the system a little bit. And Antoine Lie definitely falls into that category. You get the mint and almost like fresh mint. I actually have some fresh mint here. I love mint in my tea, and oh, it's so beautiful. Actually, the mint here, if you smell real mint like this, it smells different from the Moroccan mint. The Moroccan mint has more of this spearmint-like twist to it. And so you basically get this very fresh mint and lavender and geranium that supports the rose, and Atlas cedar. Okay, and the cedar is almost like one of the heaviest notes in this fragrance. But you'll notice Antoine Lie purposely didn't include a lot of bass heavy notes. You're not going to see resins. You're not going to see vanilla. You're not going to see labdanum or anything like that. No Peru balsam or Tolu balsam. Antoine Lie purposely didn't use anything heavy in this composition, and I think he did that because he wanted to leave enough space. You know, he wanted to leave space between the flowers, if you will, where you can see the space and let the flowers shine. And that's really the way that I think he built this fragrance. He built it to sort of support the rose, almost like the bulb of the rose supports all of the rose petals. He built this fragrance to support the rose, but you get other bits and pieces which make it more than just a rose soliflor, in my opinion. And the purposeful use of avoiding those heavier materials, I think, was a brilliant masterstroke by Antoine Lie. He really let the rose shine, if you will. And some of the other ingredients work brilliantly in kind of lifting it up, lifting the rose to the top spot on the podium. So I would say this is almost like a perfect representation of what a proper, high quality, well done, well perfumed, well blended, proper rose note should give you in a perfume. And if you have watched many of my interview live streams, on one of them, I can't remember which one, but Russian Adam said on one of my live streams, he said, smelling a rose oil, a high quality rose oil, just brings a smile to my face. He basically said it triggers the dopamine in your brain in a way that just makes you want to smile. And you know what? It's interesting because that is exactly how I would describe this fragrance. It's lovely, it's beautiful, it's pretty. It's all of those kind of adjectives you may not expect for a man to want to wear in a fragrance like this. But, oh, the rose just shows so many aspects. It's so beautiful. Like right now, I just got a hint of kind of the fruity touches. So sometimes the rose comes, it always feels mostly fresh, although later on it does change as time goes on. But there is a freshness to it, especially in the first hour or two, which is my favorite part of the fragrance. First hour or two is just stunningly realism and realistic note. The way that your brain or my brain interprets this fragrance is so realistic and natural is what really makes this fragrance set apart from some of the other roses. I would take this over Portrait of a Lady. I'm not going to lie. I don't own a bottle of Portrait of a Lady. I would like a vintage bottle of Portrait of a Lady for the collection. Like I'd love a pre-Estee Lauder bottle. But if you said, Ramsey, you have a choice of owning Rose de Jamal or Portrait of a Lady, I would take Rose de Jamal, personally. Because if I was going to own anything in that Portrait of a Lady vein, it would be the Night. I would rather have the Night, personally, because of my affinity towards oud now. But the fruity aspects of the rose do come through here. So you almost get this like pear / apple like feeling that comes through from time to time. Sometimes you'll get it, sometimes you won't. There's a lot of layers to this, and the spicy aspects end up coming through, and the spicy aspects are basically amplified by that Madagascan pink pepper. It's a CO2 distillation, and it adds, you know, a little bit of that peppery spiciness, rosy red. Pink pepper smells like a rosy pepper, basically, is how it smells. And it adds a little bit of pop, you know, it adds a little bit of freshness. Lots of designers use it in the opening to try to catch people's attention early on. It adds a beautiful freshness to it, and you definitely get that here. but you also get this spiciness, okay? And what's so amazing about Rose de Jamal to me, and you can see I put a pretty good dent in my little decant here. I've given this a fair amount of wears, okay? But what makes it so special is how weightless it feels. It almost feels like you're holding like one petal. Like if you just took a rose petal, let's see if I can get one without ripping the whole rose. It didn't want to come off. Okay, so imagine you're like holding this petal in your hand, right? And it's so light you don't actually feel it, right? It's there. You can see it's there in your hand, but you can't actually feel it because of just the weightless sensation. That's the way that the rose was kind of built in this composition. You get the supporting elements, and then when you smell the rose, it's just like almost like this effervescent floating type feel to the rose. It's beautiful. Okay, this pink rose petal, effortless weightlessness comes in the fragrance, and I don't know what makes it have that weightless pink floral smell, because the brand says that they're not using rose otto. They're not using rose essential oil, which is the best way to experience proper rose oil, in my opinion. They are using Moroccan rose absolute, and basically the difference is that the absolute is distilled in a solvent, and a solvent is used to extract the rose oil. So usually they'll use something like ethanol, right? And so the rose petals release their essence into this ethanol, and then it gets filtered out and the heavier molecules get extracted. And usually an absolute leaves the heavier portion of the molecules. So it leaves when you smell an absolute, if you smell the rose absolute versus a rose otto, a rose essential oil, the rose absolute will usually feel much heavier on your nose. So when the distillation is conducted, the heavier or the more volatile ingredients, I should say, usually evaporate, and it leaves the heavier molecules to be extracted. And it's usually very, very strong, and it has a very compact smell, and it's almost base heavy, if you will. And as this fragrance goes to its base, which this is like a 10-hour dry down, and I can still smell it, goes to show the quality of the ingredients Les Indemodables uses. But as it goes to the base, it smells more and more like a rose absolute. The opening, even though it's not pure essential oil, it's not a pure rose otto, Antoine Lie created the fragrance in a way that it smells like a rose otto, if that makes sense. So, and I have to give all of this information on distillation to my brother, Russian Adam. If you haven't watched my interviews with him, go check them out. I would urge you to check out all of the interviews, him and Sultan Pasha, and all just amazing interviews that very blessed to have them come on the channel. But that's what makes this fragrance so special to me. Not this, but I don't know why I'm holding this. But is when you first smell it, it doesn't smell like a absolute. It smells like a pure rose oil. It smells so fresh and natural, and I think that's the genius of Antoine Lie, and the genius of having a perfumer that maybe can do a little magic trick here and there, maybe a little sleight of hand. And I think if you twisted my arm, I think that Antoine Lie sort of used the geranium in the beginning to give you that fresh rose smell. And obviously some of the actual Moroccan rose absolute is obviously coming through as well, but I think he used the geranium to as a little bit of a ploy, right? It still doesn't take away from the beauty of the fragrance. Frankly, I don't care how Antoine Lie created it. I'm not a perfumer, and I don't even know if this is true. I'm just guessing. But it doesn't take away from the magic and the mystery of the fragrance to me, personally. But that would be my guess, is that there is some sort of fresher, floral note coming in first, and the absolute hits you heavier later on into the dry down. But no matter what it is, the realism of the smell, however he created it, it is an amazing. Sometimes you get these little bits of the green Moroccan mint. And you know what? When you smell the mint in Rose de Jamal, it ends up smelling a little bit like parsley sometimes. There's like this parsley-like feeling. Sometimes it smells more like spearmint, that fresher take on mint. But the Moroccan mint, from my understanding, is supposed to have almost like a blend, almost like you spliced mint and spearmint kind of together. And when I smell this, it almost gives off like this freshness of green tea. The mintiness feels, I can just imagine like mint sitting in a hot cup of green tea, and you just imagine the steam coming off, it's so hot. And mint and tea is one of my all-time favorites. That's exactly what I'm going to do with some of this tomorrow. And so you can just imagine my delight at wearing Rose de Jamal the first couple times and realizing this green tea, fresh mint / spearmint combo mixed with the rose in all its pink glory right here. And again, I wore this to work today, so I have no problem wearing these type of fragrances as my scent of the day. I actually really enjoy it. It's beautiful for the weather we're having. It's like 80, 85, 90 degrees here in Texas. And it just smells like you just distilled the rose petals themselves. If you picked each petal independently, and the green notes are being added by the mint, not the green notes of the stems or the leaves or anything like that. It doesn't feel like you're smelling stems and leaves. It smells like the green touches are coming from either the geranium or this Moroccan mint note that's used. That adds this strange realism to the mintiness, but it doesn't smell like dental floss or anything like that. You don't have to worry about toothpaste smell or anything at the dentist. Don't worry about that. It has nothing to do with that at all. So it doesn't smell like you're getting the green parts of the rose, and it doesn't smell like you're getting the leaves and or dental floss or anything like that. So Les Indemodables as a house, though, they're known for kind of going above and beyond, right? And here they did that in a couple ways. They included multiple Moroccan ingredients to go with the Moroccan rose. So they knew they were going to use Moroccan rose from Jamal's rose patch, or farmer Jamal farming his roses. And they also decided to use Moroccan mint and Moroccan geranium. The geranium is Moroccan as well, all to complement this beautiful sort of rose oil that they got from farmer Jamal, right? That's some pretty damn good dedication. I will say that. As far as painting a picture and putting everything together, hats off to them there. Now, as the fragrance dries and as the hours tick by, you get more of the Atlas cedar. That's really the heaviest note. The most of these notes are very fresh, okay? And you don't get a lot of heavy notes, as I mentioned earlier, on purpose. But the Atlas cedar is the one part of this fragrance where I was thinking, if anything can really throw this fragrance off kilter, it could be the cedar. Because, excuse me, if you've sniffed a lot of perfume in your life and you've smelled a lot of designer fragrances that use this sort of cedar note from time to time, you know that a bad woody note can really make a fragrance feel much cheaper than maybe the sum of its ingredients, right? And so I really think that the cedar note is sort of the pivot where it could have gone either way. It could have thrown this composition off kilter. But I love how they really sidestepped the issue in many of the traps potentially that could have come in, like using the heavier notes in the base to overshadow the rose, or maybe the cedar note smelling like much cheaper alternatives, right? And they avoided all of that. The cedar note here smells exactly how you would expect a high quality, well done cedar note from a brand like Les Indemodables to do. And as the fragrance dries down, interestingly enough, what ends up happening is something creamy starts to kind of emerge. So you get this slightly almost musky. There's no musk here, but it almost feels like it could be from the rose, almost like the rose turns slightly musky or creamy, whatever you want to call it. Just like, you know how some sandalwoods can sometimes feel creamy. Like Mysore sandalwood feels much more creamy and naturally musky than some of the other sandalwoods, right? And so if you can just imagine the dry down turning slightly spicier, a little bit more of that Atlas cedar coming up, and the creaminess lends to my nose this image of, if you've ever sort of been to the Middle East, they love adding rose water to desserts, right? And so one of the things, my father just got back from Jordan. He bought some of the desserts back with him. He didn't bring this dessert I'm talking about specifically, but I can remember eating custards and puddings and stuff like that from Jordan, where you would add this rose water on top and it would give it a very distinctive flair, right? This creamy sort of woodiness mixing together, if you can imagine, with the rose water, Middle Eastern style desserts, if you will. And that's what came to mind a little bit into the dry down. There is this creaminess of custard, muskiness coming from God knows where, probably the rose would be my guess as the fragrance dries down, but I wouldn't call it a gourmand any more than I would call it a rose soliflor, if you will. I just think the use of the high quality ingredients that Les Indemodables is using, the result comes to something so multifaceted and so layered that this type of sort of, I don't know, response, if you will, is almost what you would expect. Different people getting different things. And however, even though they have gone the extra mile ahead of their competitors, there's no niche house that does what Les Indemodables does with the disclosures. Like, I'll give you an example. So for Rose de Jamal, they say that 50 mils is 220 euros, which I think that's like 250 bucks, which is not bad actually when you think about it. I wish they did 100 mil bottles, but alas. And they say that this is an aromatic woody rose that is an avant-gardiste construction, no clue what the hell that means, far away from the classical use of rose and floral perfume. So here's where they really distinguish themselves from their competitors. They list Rose Absolute from Morocco, 5.5%. Now, I thought the max for IFRA was 5%, but maybe they get around that by taking out some of the problem ingredients in the rose that can give a rash. You know, one of the reasons that rose is so heavily restricted by IFRA is that if you put rose oil, especially like on the soft part of your neck, on your skin, or, you know, on your wrist, gentler parts of your skin, it could easily leave a rash, okay? Some people get rashes from heavy uses of rose oil. And so that's why IFRA restricts it. But I thought it was restricted to 5%. And so the fact that they've got 5.5% Rose Absolute from Morocco says they're doing something to get to that point and still be IFRA compliant. I think. I could be wrong, but I'm guessing that's correct. Cedarwood oil from Morocco is 2.8%. Pink pepper CO2 from Madagascar, 1.7%. And fine lavender oil from France, 0.7%. Maturation, 3 weeks. Maceration, 2 weeks. Nobody gives that kind of information in the industry. Everyone's quick to say we use high quality Rose Absolute from Morocco, but they're not quick to say it's 5.5% of the composition. And my guess is if you pulled some of these other niche houses here, if they would make a claim like that, the percentage of Rose Absolute from Morocco would be much, much, much smaller than 5.5%, would be my guess. We would probably be talking more like the 2.5 area, even the high-end niche brands, is my guess. That these are accords the perfumer's making, and they're not using as much naturals, whereas Les Indemodables, with their disclosure, I think they've really gone above and beyond the call of duty. However, I would recommend even in addition to their disclosure, okay, because many of these ingredients, and rose is one such example, have layers to them. And what I mean by that is, if you've ever heard an oud head talk about oud, from the exact same tree, you could have $1,000 oil and you could have a $50 oil from the same tree, right? It's all about how it's distilled and what part of the oud is being used and all that good stuff, right? So there are different grades to oud. There are also different grades to rose. And so, for example, you could have a low-grade rose oil, you could have a mid-grade rose oil, you could have a high-grade rose oil, you could have a royal-grade rose oil. I would love to see a brand like Les Indemodables take the next step and not only tell us it is Moroccan rose oil, but tell us it is the royal grade Moroccan rose oil, or it's the high grade, or it's the middle grade, or, you know, I would love for there to be some grading system that could be disclosed to the public. Because there are different levels of rose oil. There's different levels of oud. I'm sure there's different levels of lavender. I know Remy on some of his ingredient videos talked about how the real French lavender is like 10 times as expensive as the lavandin because they get like 10 times less the amount of yield from the actual French lavender plants, let's say. And so they've gone above and beyond the call of duty, but I still think there's space for another house to go even further and make the disclosures more to the public. More disclosures, more information, it's always better. You know, they've often hid behind this veil of secrecy. And as fragrance prices have increased more and more and more, I would just love to see more transparency, right? Just a little bit more transparency on exactly the quality that you're getting, because you're paying for that quality. You know, if even if it's 5.5%, if it's low grade, you know, rose oil, it would be great to know that compared to mid-grade, compared to high grade. Maybe they could do 2 fragrances, both the same, one with mid-grade and one with royal grade. They could charge more for the royal grade version. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but that was something that kind of popped in my head while I was reviewing this. I think there is a chance to go even further, but all in all, one of my favorite rose fragrances. Blessed to be able to do this review for you guys. I'm sad that this is the last Les Indemodables that I have access to. There is still a lot more for me to smell. I just don't have it. So one day, who knows, I'll probably stumble across some samples or something, and then I can do some more videos for you guys. But if you have ever smelled Rose de Jamal, I would love to hear your thoughts. Do leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of the house. I think Les Indemodables is kind of one of the best niche houses in the game right now. I think they are sort of replacing Frederic Malle at very close to the top of that niche pyramid, as some of my favorite old niche houses have fallen off. And even with Frederic Malle leaving his brand, some of my favorite niche houses are a little bit in turmoil right now. And so I think Les Indemodables, for me, has really jumped to the top of my favorite niche houses out there. I'd love to hear your thoughts as always. So it's a pleasure to do these videos. Thank you for watching to the end. Cheers, everybody, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.